we jump into the next news video as we have more news to get to. Let me just set it up where I know what I talked about in the previous one. But now we jump in, and unfortunately, to any fans of Danhausen, it was reported that Danhausen suffered a major injury at AEW Revolution, and Danhausen will be on the shelf for the next few months as another person. It's very interesting in my opinion because we've gone so long without, there was the longest time where John Cena's injury back in 2007 when he tore his pectoral muscle. That was the only time I ever heard about somebody tearing their pectoral muscle, and now it feels like over the last year we've heard a lot more people tearing their pectoral muscle, as Danhausen is somebody, obviously, that the injury that will keep Danhausen out of the ring is a torn pectoral muscle. I say obviously because, I wouldn't be talking about other people's torn pectoral muscles if I wasn't, if Danhausen's injury was not a torn pectoral muscle. But either way, I wish nothing but the best to Danhausen on his recovery, and I do hope that, number one, he is able to maybe return to AEW programming when he is a little bit more healed up. And, maybe we'll see him again, hopefully we'll see him again in the not-too-distant future. Now, a little bit of a conversation that has been talked about is WWE streamlining costs for WrestleMania this year. There were a lot of questions about what does this actually mean, and luckily we have Dave Meltzer that stepped in and explained it to us. That basically what it means is, WWE will be cutting costs here, there, and somewhere about WrestleMania, as a lot of sports teams and sporting events have done this, where they just cut costs here, there, but none of the streamlining of costs will be noticeable to fans. So nothing that is prevalent with WrestleMania typically is going to be taken away or not noticeable this year, outside of the fact that the international broadcast team will not be as present as they normally are, because WWE is going to have some members of the international broadcast team broadcasting from home. I don't necessarily think this means that they're going to be zooming in and watching WrestleMania like that. I just think that they're going to be in maybe an office building or something of that form and watching as WrestleMania goes on. But either way, I'm glad that nothing noticeable will change for WrestleMania. I understand why WWE wants to do this, as this brings up the continued conversation of WWE possibly being sold. And, it brings up the question of what happens next. But, you would figure with WrestleMania that maybe WrestleMania would be something that would be exempt from streamlining of costs, or exempt from, WWE fearing, not making profit or whatever the case is. And, the fact of the matter is, it's more maximizing profit to make the company look good in the eyes of a potential buyer. Which I completely understand, because that is something that everybody tries to do when they're trying to sell off assets. And, I think that's what brought up WWE possibly being sold over the pandemic, or during the pandemic, which shows that maybe this isn't the first time that WWE thought about selling the company, because the budget cuts during the pandemic, the only thing that made sense as to why WWE, who was recording major profits during that time, would make those unnecessary cuts. And I know from a standpoint of somebody who is not a part of the company that I can sit here and say it was unnecessary cuts. The reason why I could sit here and say unnecessary cuts is because is because if you are posing record profits, then why do you need to make cuts? It's that simple. If you're posing record profits, why do you need to make cuts? That's the part that we don't understand. That's the part that I think everybody didn't understand. But that's just me. But it's good that WWE will not have anything noticeable missing from WrestleMania. Maybe they'll just cut down on the amount of pyro. Maybe, there's a lot of possibilities of what they can do to streamline costs and not noticeable, make the changes not noticeable, I guess is the best way to put it. But also this goes along with the fact that WWE in the month of April will be opening the company up for the first time for first round bids with potential suitors. So it is very likely that right after WrestleMania we will be hearing information about the potential sale of the company becoming more legitimate, as the initial report was that WWE would be putting up the company, would like to get the sale done for WWE before the end of the year. Before SummerSlam. So, as I mentioned, I think in a previous news video, that WWE would likely put everything on hold until after WrestleMania, because it would allow them, from the standpoint of, being able to focus on WrestleMania, to focus on WrestleMania and not have to worry about anything else before WrestleMania. To not have to worry about anything else before WrestleMania and just be able to focus on WrestleMania and then be able to focus on the sale following WrestleMania. You know what I mean? Which is the perfect way to do it. It is the right way to do it because it allows you to focus on what needs to be focused on. And WrestleMania is something that absolutely needs to be focused on. You know what I mean? WrestleMania 100% is something that needs to be focused on without question and without fail. But that does mean that next month we should be hearing about a potential sale of the company. Speaking of a potential, AEW is. We talked about this yesterday in what was a clusterfuck because I didn't look into how. I didn't look into how in depth AEW was going with the tour of Canada later this year. But the point is that AEW will be making a 6-city tour of Canada from late June till mid-July, including AEW Forbidden Door 2, which will be including, again, New Japan, a joint show between AEW and New Japan, and it is an extreme possibility, or it is up in the air, I should say, if AEW will include Omega versus Osprey 2. Because at this point, Kenny Omega is fully healthy and fully prepared to compete at Forbidden Door 2, which he was not able to compete at Forbidden Door 1 last year because of being on the shelf and recovering from injuries that were sustained when he was AEW World Champion and also AAA World Champion and also Impact Wrestling World Champion and also just one of the hardest working men in wrestling. And the fact of the matter is, he missed the show, but he won't miss this year's show, as he will be 100% when the show rolls around. It is just a matter of if his opponent, Will Osprey, will be 100% or not, as Will Osprey is currently injured. I know that there is a possibility that maybe, just maybe, Aussie Open, I believe it's Aussie Open is his partners, that Aussie Open could be, it could be a 6-man tag team match with Aussie Open, Will Ospreay, or United Empire. That's what it is. United Empire. That United Empire and the Elite could collide in a 6-person tag team match. I know that isn't exactly what people want to see, but it could be something better than nothing, as opposed to expecting the best and hoping for the worst, and getting the worst. By that I mean expecting Kenny Omega versus Will Osprey and getting nothing instead. But that's just my opinion. As we don't know what to expect until we get closer to Forbidden Door 2, as it really depends on if Will Osprey is 100%. We do got an update on a potential new show for AEW, as it is rumored that AEW could be getting another weekly broadcast on Saturday at 6:05 Eastern Time on one of the Warner Brothers Discovery networks, which would add a third weekly program to AEW's docket alongside what will be premiering on March 25th, which is AEW All Access. The difference is, a couple of weeks ago, AEW trademarked AEW Collision, which would likely be their next weekly broadcast, or their newest weekly broadcast, which would then line up with AEW Collision, AEW Rampage, and AEW Dynamite being the three. It is just questionable, in my opinion, why Warner Bros. Discovery would choose to give AEW a third show and not give one to Ring of Honor. Maybe it is because Ring of Honor did not have that. Maybe it was because Warner Bros. Discovery did not notice a major name, or people, question the drawing power of the Ring of Honor roster to bring in talent, or bring in fans, or bring in eyes, whatever the case may be. But the last update is, so I will be giving you guys more updates on that as we get a concrete update on what's happening with AEW Collision and the new weekly show at 6:05 on a Warner Brothers sponsored network. But we do also have an update on Roxanne Perez. As I mentioned in a previous video, it did seem like the injury that Roxanne sustained following her match with Miko Satomura at NXT Roadblock, it was to cover for the bigger picture, and we got a report from Dave Meltzer that is echoing that same sentiment, as apparently Roxanne has an undisclosed injury that may keep her off TV for a short amount of time, and is the reason why the NXT Women's Championship is now vacated, or could potentially be vacated. I guess it is not official. I don't think WWE would go the route of having an interim champion like AEW would. They would vacate the title instead and then just do a rematch when the champion comes back. But also, JC Jane, I believe JC Jane is the one that's injured. And Gigi Dolan is the one in the triple threat match at Stand and Deliver. But it was supposed to be Gigi Dolan and JC Jane in a match at Stand and Deliver. But with JC Jane now injured, it seems like they're going a different route and allowing Gigi Dolan to be in the Women's Championship match at Stand and Deliver. And that is in fact the case, as Gigi Dolan is alongside Zoe Stark in that match. Either way, this is it for the news cycle today, and I will see you in the next news video, or in the next video, which is our traditional preview for AEW Rampage tonight on TNT. Stay tuned for that, and I will see you again in the not too distant future.